Welcome back to the Relentless Podcast with Kyle Becker. Americans witnessed the first Biden impeachment inquiry hearing. Or rather, some Americans did, because the corrupt corporate media largely blacked them out. MSNBC, the Communist News Network, and the Big Three propaganda outlets all blacked out the coverage, preferring instead to tell people, nothing to see here, much ado about nothing, and pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And they misrepresented what actually took place. The House Democrats pretty much summed up the media spin by deceptively editing what one of the witnesses said. They claimed that preeminent scholar Jonathan Turley dismissed the basis for the impeachment inquiry by going to a cherry-picked soundbite.
In fact, I do not believe that the current evidence would support articles of impeachment.
But let's give the real quote, the fuller context, instead of the deceptively edited version.
And then it was just 3 years ago that another impeachment occurred without any hearings at all. The shortening intervals between impeachments should be a cause of concern and circumspection for all the members on both sides. And I want to emphasize what it is that we're here today for. This is a question of an impeachment inquiry. It is not a vote on articles of impeachment. In fact, I do not believe that the current evidence would support articles of impeachment.
This was indicative of the media's approach. Spin, lie, and cover up. All to protect a patently corrupt first family whose paterfamilias is presiding over the United States. And quite disastrously, I might add, demonstrating extremely weak and suspect policies towards two countries who have featured prominently in his administration's foreign relations, Ukraine and China. Now, House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer has obviously seen enough and thinks an actual impeachment of Joe Biden is justified. Period. Case closed. Here is what he said. Quote, "There's overwhelming evidence that Joe Biden was involved in all of these shady business schemes. That's a problem. That's a threat to our national security. We're going to continue to move forward and follow the money." Unquote. But while the Democrats may scoff at such a notion, believing there's been no smoking gun, that is not needed to justify impeachment. It's like if an investigator was tracking a suspect, and wherever he went, dead bodies followed. But nobody is quite sure where the bodies are buried. Jonathan Turley shot down the myth that you need Joe's fingerprints on a murder weapon to prove that he is an accessory to the crime.
False statements, influence peddling scheme, and Joe Biden might have benefited. Let's do the third one first. Is a benefit to your family, can a benefit to your family be a benefit to you?
It is. There's been repeated statements that you need to show that President Biden accepted direct money in order for this to constitute a benefit, even under criminal cases that deal with bribery, extortion, the Hobbs Act. The courts actually have rejected that. They've said that money going to family members is in fact a benefit, and I don't really see any legal basis for that. Obviously, the strongest case is if you have a direct payment. But this idea that you can have millions going to a politician's family and that's not a benefit, I think is pretty fallacious.
So the main question seems to be, was there a quid pro quo for Joe? And was there actual access being sold during Joe Biden's time in office? And on that point, there can be no doubt that there was actual access being sold to Joe Biden because of the extremely unusual amount of access that Hunter Biden's business associates had to the White House when he was vice president. Now that we've dispelled the media myth that a smoking gun is needed to impeach Joe Biden, let me debunk this illusion of access talking point once and for all. Fact: Hunter Biden's associates were invited to the White House over 80 times when Joe was vice president. Fact: Joe Biden spoke with Hunter Biden business partners at least 20 times by phone. Fact: Hunter Biden flew at least 15 times on Air Force Two, many times to meet with business partners. Fact: Hunter Biden's Mexican billionaire business partners flew on Air Force Two. Fact: Hunter Biden worked events such as at an April 22, 2005 social gathering where Joe and Hunter tag teamed to arrange business clients. Fact: Joe Biden used pseudonyms to send official government information to Hunter Biden, and at least once copied him using his business address. Fact: Hunter Biden's associates sent multiple requests for favors to the White House. Rosemont Seneca Partners, for example, exchanged over 1,000 emails on business matters with the Biden White House. The White House has refused to turn over 200 such emails. Fact: Jonathan Lee, a Hunter Biden business partner, wired him $10,000 and $250,000 while listing Joe Biden's home address. Devin Archer testified Joe Biden had dinner with Lee in Beijing and wrote college recommendation letters for Lee's children. Fact: Hunter Biden threatened a Chinese businessman to pay up or face his wrath. Quote, "I am sitting here with my father, and we would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled." Unquote. The threat worked. The man would wire $100,000 within 24 hours. The Chinese businessman, Henry Zhao, has been missing since 2018 and is likely dead. Forensic investigators found that it is quite possible that Joe Biden was in the room with Hunter when this threat was made. Fact: Joe Biden met in person with Burisma executive Vadim Pozharsky, who is alluded to in a transcript. This was in 2015, prior to records showing that Joe Biden was likely behind the shift to pressure Ukraine to fire the prosecutor, Shokin. Fact: Joe Biden met in person with Moscow mayor's wife, Yelena Baturina, who wired $3.5 million to a Hunter Biden firm. Baturina would mysteriously escape sanctions under both the Obama presidency and the Biden presidency. This isn't an illusion of access. This is more access than corrupt businessmen and foreign agents could ever dream of having to a U.S. White House. Again, just like there's no good justification for foreign agents and shady businessmen to be sending Biden family members millions of dollars in exchange for nothing of substance, there is no good justification for Joe Biden and his office's deep involvement with Hunter Biden's business partners. They were not his legal advisors. They were not political experts. They were not members of his staff. There is absolutely no good reason for him and his staff to be spending so much time and so much resources on these Hunter Biden business associates, except to aid and abet their activities. This may not just be acts of commission, by the way, like writing recommendation letters as a political favor, or quietly pushing for a redirection of U.S. foreign policy to go after the Ukrainian prosecutor or withhold $1 billion. But acts of omission, such as refusing to recommend that Baturina be put on the Russian sanctions list. Now, in addition to all of that, we have the compelling exchange between Byron Donalds, the congressman from Florida who has a background in banking, and impeachment inquiry witness Bruce Dubinsky, who is a forensic accounting expert. Both Dubinsky and Eileen O'Connor, former Assistant Attorney General in the Department of Justice Tax Division, agree that the business structure of Hunter and James Biden, Devin Archer, Eric Schwerin, and other associates' enterprises is well worth investigating. That's because they had virtually nothing to trade for the millions and millions of dollars that they received, except actual access to Joe Biden.
Mr. Dubinsky, I want to come to you quickly. A lot of talk about evidence. On the screens in the room, we have an organizational chart from the IRS investigative team that was looking into the business practices of Hunter Biden and his associates. This org chart is from 2014. Now, Mr. Dubinsky, when my former life, I was in community banking, and I'm comfortable with looking at organizational charts. When I first saw this chart, the first thing I thought about was a real estate holding company or a developer, and this is not to demean developers in the great East State of America, but developers typically have multiple companies that float with various business interests and business lines. But the funny thing is that in the business dealings of Hunter Biden, there is no real estate. None at all. So, Mr. Dubinsky, in your professional experience, looking at this organizational chart of business structure, what do you see here?
I see a very complicated structure of entities that are interrelated and would give me concern. If I were an investigator, I would want to know what's going on in these entities, who's behind them, how's the money moving between them, and what is the substance of the transactions? What's really going on here?
Mr. Dubinsky, do you think it's in the interest of this committee that is now in an inquiry phase to actually find out all of the flow of money between these entities and what the purpose was?
Absolutely.
Next slide, please. This is a text message between Hunter Biden and Naomi Biden. And this one is a famous one. Everybody knows this one. This is the famous one that says, I hope you all do what I did and pay for everything for this entire family for 30 years. It's really hard. But don't worry, unlike Pop, I won't make you give me half your salary. Mr. Dubinsky, if you saw a text message like this in a potential money laundering operation or a potential pay-for-play operation, would you be looking for information related to money going from son to father?
Absolutely, without a doubt.
And North Dakota Congressman Kelly Armstrong also raised some eyebrows and some hairs on the backs of people's necks by unraveling the Biden shakedown scheme.
Now, on July 30th of 2017, there's a text with Hunter Biden and the members of CEFC. And that text reads, if I get a call or text from anyone involved other than you, Zhang, or the chairman, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following that direction. The people he's talking in, this guy disappeared. He's either been killed or he has not been seen since 2018. That is true. And then August 30th, August 3rd, there's another text. And I'm tired of this, Kevin. I can make $5 million in salary at any law firm in America. If you think this is about money, it's not. The Bidens are the best I know at doing exactly what the chairman wants from this partnership. Please do not quibble over peanuts. We talked about influence peddling. We've talked about all of this. This is a shakedown. Like, we can use whatever terms we want. This is a threat. And they believed it because the next day they sent $100,000. Do you think they were scared of Hunter Biden? I don't know. I think we should find out.
But of course, the Democrats were having none of it. They screamed and yelled about there being no evidence and throwing a fit for Americans to see at the mere prospect that there might be some accountability for the Democrats' blatant public corruption. Georgia firebrand Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, sent Democrats scrambling into panic mode when she produced new evidence that Hunter Biden seemed to be guilty of committing federal crimes against human trafficking.
Hunter Biden's victim stated that her friend told her, "You have no idea who you're dealing with." These women were terrified. He used his father, Hunter Biden used his father, the Vice President of the United States, to threaten his victim, who he had just trafficked for sex. And the Department of Justice refuses to speak to me? Hunter Biden needs to be held accountable for his sexual exploitation of women. And we've shown more evidence. We've shown evidence. This is what it looks like. This is what Mann Act violations look like.
Mr. Chairman,
I reclaim my time.
I'd like to challenge the use of this exhibit under Clause 6 of Rule 17.
It is sad that my Democratic colleagues pretend to care about women's rights while allowing Hunter Biden to exploit women. This is a shame.
And one of the lowlights showed a Texas congresswoman named Jasmine Crockett going buck wild at the hearings by throwing anything she could at the very notion of investigating Joe Biden and making the ludicrous argument that Joe is only guilty of loving his son.
Honestly, if they would continue to say if or Hunter and we were playing a drinking game, I would be drunk by now. Because I promise you, they have not talked about the subject of this, which would be the president. But let me tell you something that was so disturbing as I walked in to this chamber today. As I prepared, I said, what is the crime? Because when you're talking about impeachment, you're talking about high crimes or misdemeanors. And I can't seem to find the crime. And honestly, no one has testified of what crime they believe the president of the United States has committed. But when we start talking about things that look like evidence, they want to act like they blind. They don't know what this is. These are our national secrets. Looks like in the shitter to me. This looks like more evidence of our national secrets, say on a stage what the president has been guilty of. He has unfortunately been guilty of loving his child unconditionally, and that is the only evidence that they have brought forward. And honestly, I hope and pray that my parents love me half as much as he loves his child. Until they find some evidence, we need to get back to the people's work, which means keeping this government open so that people don't go hungry in the streets of the United States. And I will yield.
All of Crockett's screaming and caterwauling was reminiscent of a scene from The Exorcist. While Republicans coolly and calmly laid out the facts, the Democrats word vomited, no evidence, and illegitimate.
What is it?
Or maybe another good comparison is Damien being dragged to church in The Omen.
Mr. Ambassador, welcome, sir. Good morning.
But keep the faith, America. One way or another, accountability is coming for these shameless lying politicians. The Democrats' behavior at the Biden impeachment inquiry is something we've seen before. When all the stops were pulled out on January 6th to prevent Americans from hearing evidence of voting irregularities in the 2020 election. The Dems bridled at the thought of further scrutiny of the election, such as Ted Cruz's proposal that a commission be formed, similar to that one formed in the 1876 election, to review the votes of states where election slates were being challenged. Everything appeared to be on the table to disrupt that fair hearing. And America moved on, and the nation is the weaker for it, because there was no satisfactory resolution in the minds of tens of millions of American voters. Not just Trump supporters, mind you, but even many Democrats acknowledged that the election was not quite up to the standard of being the most secure in history, as was trumpeted endlessly in the mainstream media. We're a bit wiser to the radical Democrats' ways. We must be prepared for their hijinks and their obstruction and their deception, because there is no low too low for them. All they care about is retaining power, because it means trillions of our dollars at their disposal to give away to their radical activist allies. It also means they can get rich quick in Washington, D.C. Nobody knows how. There are no smoking guns. That they are selling access and trading favors and being compromised by foreign powers like China. That's what all their grandstanding and theatrics and juvenile temper tantrums are really all about. They don't want to grant legitimacy to any mechanism of accountability that can hold them to account and restore the power of the government into the service of the people, instead of the people in the service of them and their tremendous egos. America cannot be free with this state of affairs. But there's only one thing that can set the nation free: the truth. That's all for now. If you have something to add, please comment to us or share this to keep the conversation going. We appreciate you spreading the word to help keep people informed about what the compromised corporate media are too corrupt to tell us. As for now, stay relentless about your freedom, America.